They sold you a lie, and they sold it one little bottle at a time. Go look under your sink and in your bathroom drawer right now and count what's in there. One tube for your chest, one for your aching shoulder, one for your dry heels, one for your lips, one for the squeak in the door, one for the cat, one for the closet, a different label and a different markup on every one of them. And here's the part that ought to make your jaw tighten. Half of those jobs were always done by one little blue jar that cost less than any single tube up on that shelf. One honest word before we start, because I won't talk to you the way those labels did. Use the plain drugstore kind. Keep it well away from the little ones and far from anybody's eyes. And never warm it on the stove, because heated up, it can give you a real burn. That's the only warning you need, and I mean it. Now stick with me all the way to number 1, because the cheapest thing on this whole list is the one they spent the most money teaching you to feel foolish for reaching for. Let's go. Number 25. A squeaky door hinge. That one door that announces every late-night trip to the kitchen every time you check on a sleeping child. Your grandma never called a handyman for it. She dipped a fingertip in the jar, worked it into the hinge pin, and swung the door back and forth a few times to carry it down into the joint. And here's why it actually works and isn't an old wives' tale. That ointment is more than half petroleum jelly, the very same slick grease they pack into machine bearings, and a squeak is nothing but dry metal scraping dry metal. The jelly coats both faces and fills the tiny gaps so they glide instead of grind. The hardware store wanted to sell her a whole can of oil for one hinge. She needed a fingertip. Number 24, a sticking drawer. The wooden one that screams and jumps every time you yank it, the junk drawer that fights you every single morning. She'd rub a thin film along the wooden runners, the rails it rides on, top and bottom, and shut it like it was new. Wood swells and roughens as it ages and drags against wood. The jelly lays down a slick path so it slides clean. They sell a special drawer wax in a fancy stick for exactly this job. She already had the answer in the medicine cabinet. Number 23, a tight, stubborn zipper. The good winter coat with the zip that catches halfway and won't budge, and you're standing in the doorway already late. The barest touch worked along the teeth, then the slider run up and down a few times, and it ran smooth again. Those teeth catch because they've gone dry or picked up a little corrosion. The jelly lets the slider pass clean over them. Same trick rescues a zipper on a tent, a boot, an old suitcase. Nobody ever needed the zipper lubricant they sell in the camping aisle. Number 22, a stuck jar lid. The pickle jar the whole family gives up on, getting passed around the kitchen. Your grandma ran a thin smear around the rim where the lid threads onto the glass and gave it a minute. It seeps into the threads and breaks the dried, sugary seal that's gluing the thing shut, and the lid turns like it never fought you. Cheaper than one of those rubber grippers, and it lives in the same cabinet as the jar. Number 21, crayon on the wall. Every parent has stood frozen in front of a purple mural across the good paint, wondering whether it ever comes off. It does. Dab a little straight onto the marks, rub gently in small circles with a soft cloth, then go over it once with a damp rag to lift the oily film. And the reason is genuinely clever. Crayon is mostly wax, and that petroleum base dissolves wax. Like dissolves like. So the grease grabs hold of the crayon and lets go of the paint, instead of you scrubbing both off the wall together. They built a whole aisle of magic erasers for what was already sitting in the cabinet. Number 20, sticky label residue. The price sticker fused onto a new dish. The gummy ghost a label leaves when it half peels. The tape mark that won't quit. Smear a coat over it and walk away a few minutes. The oil creeps under the adhesive and breaks its grip on the surface. And then it lifts off with a thumbnail or the edge of a butter knife instead of fighting you for 10 minutes. They sell a whole spray can of adhesive remover for that. She used what was already open. Number 19, a ring stuck on a finger. The knuckle's swollen on a hot day, and the ring won't come past it, and that little flicker of panic starts. Your grandma stayed calm and worked a good amount around the finger and the ring, then twisted and eased it gently over the knuckle. The jelly cuts the friction that's trapping it, so the ring slides instead of dragging on dry skin. Calmer than soap and cold water at the sink, and you're not standing there yanking and making the swelling worse. Number 18, cracked heels. Those deep, painful winter splits at the back of the foot that catch on the bed sheets. She'd slather a generous coat on at bedtime and pull an old pair of socks over the top to lock it in and save the sheets. And by morning, the skin had softened and started to close. And here's the secret the foot care shelf would rather you didn't hear said plainly. Ask any dermatologist what's best for cracked heels, and they'll tell you a plain occlusive, something that seals water into the skin so it can mend underneath. That blue jar is an occlusive. It's the identical science in the $12 intensive heel repair tube, minus the tube and minus the $11. Number 17, dry, ragged cuticles. The skin around the nail that splits and catches on everything in the dry months. A tiny bit massaged in at night, same principle as the heels. Seal the moisture in and let the skin repair itself while you sleep. The salon sells a dedicated cuticle oil in a little glass bottle with its own tiny brush and charges accordingly. Your grandma's version cost pennies and worked on the same idea. Number 16, chapped lips. The cracked, sore lips that come with wind and dry indoor heat. A thin layer, especially before bed. And listen close, because here's where they really got you. It is not menthol healing your lips. That tingle just feels like something. It's that same petroleum base laying down a barrier that stops the wind and the dry furnace air from wicking the moisture straight out of the cracks. They took that one ingredient, squeezed it into a tube the size of your thumb, gave it a name and a flavor, and charged $4 for a smear of the very thing in the big jar. Number 15, glasses sliding down your nose. That maddening little slip all day long, the constant push back up with one finger. The barest touch on the nose pads, and I mean barely anything, adds just enough grip and cushion that they sit where they belong instead of creeping. Wipe and redo it when it wears off. A free fix for what the optical shop sells little silicone pads to solve. Number 14, salt-crusted winter boots. That white tide line the road salt leaves dried across good leather. Once the boot's fully dry, your grandma rubbed a little over the crust and wiped it away with a cloth. The grease loosens and lifts the dried salt, and it leaves a faint conditioning sheen on the leather instead of that bleached-out stain. The shoe shop wanted to sell her a special salt stain remover every winter. She had it handled. Number 13, scuffed leather. A shoe or a bag with a pale scuff right before you have to walk out the door. A dab buffed in with a soft cloth darkens the scuff back to match the leather and feeds a little moisture into it. It's not a permanent repair, I'll be honest with you, but for a quick rescue when you're already late, it beats a $15 tin of polish you'd have to dig out and open. Number 12, stiff, squeaky leather shoes, and that one shoe that chirps. The single shoe that announces every step on a hard floor, usually because the insole or the tongue is rubbing. A little worked in where the rubbing happens quiets it the same way it quiets a hinge. Less friction, less noise. Nobody ever sold a product for "the left shoe squeaks." Your grandma just fixed it. Number 11, a splinter. The child comes in crying with a sliver of the porch fence buried in a thumb, and everyone's first instinct is to lunge for a needle and start digging. Your grandma did the opposite. A dab over the spot, a bandage on top, and a little time. The skin around it softens and swells just slightly, loosening its hold, so when you finally bring the tweezers, the splinter gives itself up easily instead of snapping off underneath. Less digging, fewer tears, and a far lower chance of turning a splinter into an infected sore. Nobody ever made a product for "be patient for 20 minutes. Number 10, moths in the closet. Your good wool sweaters, folded away for the summer and quietly vulnerable. Skip the mothballs. That chemical reek haunts a coat for a year and you can smell it across a room. And instead, put a dab on a cotton ball, tuck a few of them into the drawer corners and the back of the shelf, and refresh them every few weeks. The strong scent makes the space uninviting, so the moths won't settle in and lay the eggs, whose larvae are what actually chew the holes. A deterrent, not a poison. Number 9, cats where you don't want them. The sofa arm they've decided is a scratching post, the houseplant they keep chewing. A small smear on the spot they keep hitting. What you and I find sharp and bracing, a cat finds genuinely unbearable. Their nose runs circles around ours, so they simply decide that corner isn't worth their time. Gentle training by smell, no spray bottle, and no scolding. Just test a hidden patch of the fabric first so you don't leave a mark. Number 8, smelly shoes. The teenager's sneakers that can empty a room when he kicks them off by the door. A small dab inside each one overnight, then wipe out whatever's left in the morning. The strong scent simply overpowers the sour bacterial smell that built up from sweat. It's masking, I'll tell you straight, but it's free and it beats the special shoe powder they'd love to sell you a can of. Number 7, a musty drawer or closet or fresh paint fumes. The suitcase that's been shut since last summer, the cabinet that smells like old wood, the small room you just painted that gives you a headache to stand in. Leave a small, open dab in the musty spot or a dabbed cotton ball in the corner, and that strong, clean scent overrides the stale one. Now I'll be straight with you. This is masking, not curing. It buys you a fresh-smelling drawer and a room you can stand to be in while you track down whatever's actually damp. But it's free, and the air freshener company would rather you bought a plug-in. Number 6, the vacuum that smells like hot dust. That warm, stale smell the motor blows back around the room the longer you run it. Put a dab on a cotton ball or a bit of tissue and drop it into the bag or the dust cup. As the motor heats up, it carries that clean scent out through the exhaust and through the room instead of the hot dust smell. They sell little scented pellets for exactly this. Your grandma used a cotton ball. Number 5, pet fur welded into the armchair. The spot where the dog always lies, the fur woven so deep into the weave that the vacuum just glides right over it. Work a small amount into a cloth, into the cloth, not onto the chair, and wipe it over the spot. The faint, slick film gives the fur far less to cling to, so it gathers up in one pass instead of laughing at you. Light touch is the whole trick. You're conditioning the rag, not greasing your furniture. Number 4, stainless steel shine. The toaster, the kettle, the front of the icebox, all fingerprints and that dull cooking film. Put the barest smear on a soft cloth. Buff it in along the direction of the grain. Then immediately buff it back off with a clean, dry cloth. The oily base lifts the smudges and leaves a thin protective shine behind. And the whole secret is barely any. Go heavy and you've just traded fingerprints for streaks. They sell a special stainless spray for $8. The jar does it for almost nothing. Number 3, itchy bug bites. The summer child who scratched a mosquito welt raw and can't leave it alone. A dab right on the welt. That cooling signal talks right over the itch, the same way it talks over a sore muscle. The brain can't fully register itch and cold from the same spot at the same time, so the urge to scratch eases off. And not scratching is the entire game here, because scratching is what tears the skin and turns a harmless bite into an infected sore. Now, this is for the ordinary bug bite on healthy skin, not for broken skin, and we'll get to why that line matters in a minute. Number 2, sore muscles and stiff, aching joints. The shoulders after a long day in the garden, the knee that complains going down the stairs, and this one is right there on the jar as an approved use, so it's not folklore at all, it's the label's own job. But understand what it's truly doing. It's a counter-irritant. It floods the skin with such a loud, cooling, then warming signal that your brain turns its attention to that sensation and turns the volume down on the deeper ache underneath. It's honest distraction, and it works. They sell that exact same effect today in a sports tube with a racing stripe and an athlete's name on it for 3 times the money. Same idea, fancier clothes. And before number 1, here's the story that's worth more than any single hack, because it's the one that tells you I'm not just selling you the jar either. For a long, long time, people smeared this stuff straight onto cuts, scrapes, and small kitchen burns. And they weren't being foolish, it carried a healing reputation for years, partly because its plain cousin, petroleum jelly, genuinely was used to dress wounds going back to the trenches of the world wars. So the instinct had real history behind it. And then the doctors looked harder and reversed themselves completely, and now they'll tell you flat out, keep it off broken skin and off burns. 2 real reasons. First, the camphor that gives it that smell soaks far too fast through skin that's torn or burned open, and camphor in enough quantity is genuinely poisonous. That's the very reason every jar on the shelf warns you to keep it away from children. Second, sealing a fresh wound under a thick, greasy layer can trap the very bacteria your body is working to flush out. So this is the one I will not tell you how to do, because the honest answer is that you don't. People did it with the best information they had, the experts went along with it for a while, and then everyone learned better. And the respectful thing is to learn better right along with them. And now, number 1, the single cheapest thing on this entire list, and the one they buried the deepest. Here's the twist. It isn't really in the blue jar at all. It's the jar's own quiet backbone, the workhorse nobody ever bothered to print on the front of the label. Plain petroleum jelly. It makes up more than half of what's in there, and it's the thing actually doing the work in half the tricks I just handed you. The sealed heels, the soft lips and cuticles, the lifted crayon, the loosened splinter, the silenced hinge, the freed zipper, the unstuck lid. Before there was an aisle, before there were 15 specialized bottles and tubes, there was one jar of that plain jelly in nearly every medicine cabinet in this country, and people called it the Wonder Jelly and reached for it for just about everything. And that, right there, is the whole game they ran on you. They took the one cheap, honest thing that quietly did a dozen jobs. They split it into a dozen branded bottles with a dozen different names and a dozen separate markups, and then they spent a fortune teaching you to feel just a little bit foolish for reaching for the plain jar. Too simple, too old-fashioned. Surely the real product must be better. It was not better. It was the very same thing wearing more expensive clothes. So there it is. half a sink, and a whole drawer full of bottles, and one little jar that quietly did the lot. If even one of these saves you a trip down that aisle, do me the one small favor and tap that like button. It costs you nothing, same as the jar, and it's the only reason the next person ever hears any of this instead of the commercial. Subscribe and stick close because I've got a whole cabinet of this kind of thing and I am nowhere near done opening drawers. Now go count the bottles under your sink and then go find the jar.